March 18, 1937. New London, Texas. Before we uncover the terrifying hidden history of why the natural gas in your home smells like rotten eggs, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and like this video. While you do that, let me take you back to the height of the Great Depression, to a town that was experiencing an unimaginable, overflowing amount of wealth. In the 1930s, while most of America was starving and standing in endless breadlines, Rusk County, Texas, was sitting on top of the largest oil field ever discovered in the United States. Money was quite literally bursting from the ground. With this massive influx of oil wealth, the local school board decided to build a monument to their prosperity. They built the New London Junior-Senior High School. Completed in 1932 at a staggering cost of over $1 million, an absolute fortune at the time, it was widely considered the wealthiest, most luxurious rural school in the entire nation. It was a massive, beautiful, sprawling structure made of steel and yellow brick. It had the finest laboratories, a massive gymnasium, and the first ever fully illuminated high school football stadium in the state of Texas. It was the absolute pride and joy of the booming oil community. But beneath the beautiful brick exterior and the modern classrooms, the school board made a quiet, seemingly minor financial decision. It was a decision made entirely in the name of saving a few extra dollars, but it would ultimately become the deadliest, most catastrophic mistake in the history of American education. Despite being the wealthiest school district in the entire country, the school board was constantly looking for ways to cut operating costs. The massive school was originally designed to be heated by commercial natural gas, safely supplied by the United Gas Company. But heating such a colossal building was expensive, costing the district about $300 a month. So, in early 1937, the board secretly canceled their contract with the gas company. Instead, they authorized the school's maintenance staff to tap directly into a residue gas line owned by the Parade Gasoline Company. This was a common, completely unregulated practice in the oil fields at the time. Residue gas, also known as wet gas, was the raw, unrefined byproduct of oil extraction. It was essentially free. The oil companies simply flared it off or let locals tap into it at their own risk. But there were two terrifying, deadly problems with this raw gas. First, the pressure in the lines wildly fluctuated, making it incredibly unstable. Second, and most importantly, raw natural gas in 1937 was entirely odorless. It was an invisible, silent, and undetectable phantom. What no one realized was that a faulty connection in the school's basement had begun to leak. For days, the heavy, highly explosive raw gas silently poured into the massive, enclosed crawl space beneath the school. It pooled in the dark, stretching for hundreds of feet directly beneath the wooden floors of the classrooms. It was a massive, invisible ocean of explosive power, patiently waiting in the absolute dark. And because it had absolutely no smell, the hundreds of students and teachers walking directly above it had absolutely no idea they were sitting on top of a ticking bomb. The afternoon of Thursday, March 18, 1937, was cold and dreary. A heavy, freezing rain was falling over the Texas oil fields, forcing everyone to stay indoors. Inside the massive New London school, it was 3:15 in the afternoon. Classes were just 15 minutes away from being dismissed for the weekend. Up in the large auditorium, the local parent-teacher association was holding a meeting. Mothers were chatting, drinking coffee, and waiting to take their children home. In the classrooms, teachers were writing final assignments on the chalkboards. Down in the basement, in the manual arts shop class, the beloved instructor Lemmy R. Butler was wrapping up a woodworking lesson with his students. The air in the basement was thick, but again, there was absolutely no smell to warn them of the deadly atmosphere they were breathing. The crawl space directly adjacent to the shop class was now filled to the absolute brim with the raw, highly explosive residue gas. The mixture of gas and oxygen had reached the perfect, catastrophic ratio for maximum combustion. It was a tragedy suspended in a single fragile second. At exactly 3:17 p.m., Lemmy Butler walked over to a heavy wooden sanding machine. He reached out and flipped the electrical switch to turn the machine on. Deep inside the electrical casing, out of sight, a tiny, microscopic spark arced between the metal contacts. In any normal situation, it would have been completely harmless. But in the gas-filled basement of the New London school, that single, invisible spark was the trigger to the apocalypse. The explosion didn't just tear through the school, it fundamentally completely shattered the earth. A terrifying, deafening roar, so incredibly loud that it was heard by oil workers over 4 miles away, violently ripped through the Texas afternoon. The sheer, incomprehensible force of the blast was directed upward. Witnesses standing outside watched in absolute paralyzed horror as the massive heavy roof of the main wing of the school simply lifted straight into the air. The thick brick walls violently blew outward in every direction. For a fraction of a second, the building seemed to hang suspended in the sky. And then gravity took over. The entire colossal structure, thousands of tons of steel, concrete, and yellow brick, catastrophically collapsed inward, instantly burying over 500 students and teachers beneath a mountain of heavy, suffocating rubble. A massive 75,000-pound concrete slab crashed directly down into the main section of the building. A terrifying, thick cloud of dust and pulverized brick shot hundreds of feet into the freezing rain, completely blocking out the sun and turning the afternoon sky pitch black. For one long, horrifying minute, there was absolute, total silence across the town of New London. The sheer shock of the blast had rendered the world completely mute. But then the screaming began. The mothers who had been in the auditorium, which miraculously survived the main blast, ran out into the freezing rain, tearing at their hair and screaming the names of their children as they stared at a 2-story mountain of unrecognizable, smoking rubble. Within minutes, the news of the catastrophic collapse spread like wildfire through the surrounding oil fields. In an incredible display of American resilience and heroism, over 2,000 roughnecks, drillers and pipeline workers immediately dropped their tools. They abandoned their lucrative oil rigs, jumped into their heavy trucks and rushed directly to the shattered school. They brought heavy bulldozers, massive steel winches and massive floodlights. As the dark, freezing night closed in, the ruined campus was illuminated by the harsh glare of the emergency lights. The scene was heartbreaking. Grown men, hardened by years of dangerous oil work, wept openly as they dug through the heavy brick and jagged steel with their bare, bleeding hands, desperate to pull the trapped survivors from the ruins. Medical supplies in the small rural hospitals were instantly exhausted. Local pharmacies completely emptied their shelves of bandages and morphine, handing them out for free to the rescue workers. The entire town of New London had been completely devastated. There was barely a single family in the region who had not lost a child, a cousin, or a neighbor in the catastrophic collapse. The rescue and recovery effort continued frantically through the freezing rain for days. The physical devastation of the building was so complete, so incredibly absolute, that it forced the state of Texas to reevaluate the very foundation of how public buildings were constructed and maintained. As the horrific news spread across the nation via frantic telegraph messages, an unprecedented wave of help descended upon the small Texas town. The American Red Cross immediately dispatched special emergency trains from Dallas and Houston, loaded to the absolute brim with doctors, nurses, and critical medical supplies. The legendary Texas Rangers and the National Highway Patrol were heavily mobilized to control the massive crowds of frantic relatives, journalists, and volunteers pouring into New London. The sheer logistical nightmare of the rescue operation was staggering. Because the catastrophic explosion had completely destroyed the school's electrical system, the heavy rain and pitch-black night made the frantic search nearly impossible. Yet the rugged oil workers absolutely refused to stop. They ingeniously rigged up massive temporary floodlights powered by the very oil rigs that surrounded the town, casting long haunting shadows over the twisted steel and broken yellow brick. The local community buildings, including churches and nearby intact gymnasiums, were instantly converted into makeshift triage centers and emergency morgues. The town's small funeral homes were completely, devastatingly overwhelmed, forcing neighboring cities to send hundreds of wooden caskets in a heartbreaking caravan down the muddy Texas highways. It was a scene of unparalleled communal grief, but also of incredible, unbreakable unity. People from all walks of life who had never even met stood shoulder to shoulder in the freezing mud, passing heavy chunks of concrete bucket by bucket, refusing to give up hope as long as there was even a fraction of a chance to save another life from the ruins. When the final agonizing search was completed, the death toll stood at a staggering 295 lives lost, the vast majority of them innocent children. It remains to this day the deadliest school disaster in United States history. The tragedy sent shockwaves around the entire globe. Even international leaders like Adolf Hitler in Germany and King George VI in England sent official telegrams of condolence to the heartbroken Texas town. But from the ashes of this unimaginable devastation came a profound, world-changing scientific legacy. The Texas legislature immediately held emergency sessions. They realized that the invisible, odorless nature of the gas was the true killer. Within weeks of the disaster, Texas passed a groundbreaking law requiring that a chemical odorant, a compound called thiol or mercaptan, be added to all natural gas used for commercial and residential purposes. Mercaptan is what gives natural gas that distinct, unmistakable and highly unpleasant smell of rotten eggs. This simple but brilliant chemical addition meant that a leak could be instantly detected by the human nose long before it ever reached explosive levels. This life-saving practice quickly spread across the United States and eventually the entire world. The children of New London did not die in vain. Because of their tragic loss, millions of lives have been saved over the last 9 decades. Every single time you smell that foul, rotten egg odor in your kitchen or your basement and call for help, you owe your life to the legacy of the 1937 New London school disaster. Now, I turn the question to you. Did you know the dark history behind the smell of natural gas? Have you ever had a terrifying close call with a gas leak in your own home? Let us know your thoughts and your stories in the comments below. And if you made it this far into the story, thank you so much for watching America Retold. Your history is America's history and we want to hear it.